Welcome everyone to our live panel, RPMA versus the competition. So we've got a lot of questions that have really prompted this panel, such as how do you compare to Sigfox and LoRa? What are your thoughts on NB-IoT and others? Where does RPMA fit in? And so we decided it was probably time just to go ahead and directly address many of the questions we get. And here we are. On our panel we have Dr. Ted Myers, co-founder of Ingenu,
Hello.
as well as our current CTO. And then we also have Josh Bilta, former Associate Director of M2M Communications at IHS, and our current VP of Product Management here at Ingenu, and I'm Dr. Mike Podomsky, Principal Data Scientist at Ingenu. All right, so a lot of talk and a lot of things have been happening around LPWA, Low Power Wide Area Networks, and it's been getting a lot of attention. So the first question for our panelists today is, why is LPWA so exciting?
I'll start, I guess. I think there's a variety of reasons why people are so excited about the LPWA technologies. First and foremost, I think it must be remembered, this is really the first time we've had technologies truly optimized and designed for the IoT environment come to market. And I think this alone will have a very substantial impact. Really, for any market to take the next level of growth and to grow at the levels we expect IoT to, the appropriate technology solutions need to be in place. And there's multiple examples of this. Look at something like mobile video streaming. Mobile video did not really take off until 4G LTE networks were deployed, and since about 2013 we've had about a 400% growth in mobile video consumption. I think LPWA can play a similar role and drive similar growth in the IoT. We're talking about a truly unique set of technologies that are designed for the truly unique demands of the IoT environment. So what is LPWA? The first part, low power. What does that mean? That means these technologies can connect battery-powered devices for 5, 10, in some cases maybe 15 or 20 years. And why is that important? It's important because the ROI of many IoT applications is dependent on the fact that these devices have to be serviced on a very infrequent basis. So low power is essential, and of course low power in LPWA also addresses one of the key deficiencies of current cellular technologies. The other element of LPWA, wide area, why is that important? It's important because it means simplicity. It means you take that device out of the box, you turn it on, and you're connected. And I think this simple out-of-the-box connectivity is absolutely essential if we're going to hit the numbers we all talk about with IoT, whether it's hundreds of millions or tens of billions of devices. The other solutions out on the market, whether they're using some sort of short-range technology solution or some sort of mesh networking, are not nearly as simple to use as wide-area technologies.
Okay, great. So just to summarize a bit, what you're saying is that for the first time we have technology that's optimized for the IoT because of the long battery life, low power consumption, and wide area. And interestingly, you brought out that ROI, which is what's really important, needs infrequent service trips, or truck rolls is another word for it. And that's what really hits the businesses, I think, is just needing to get that ROI, those infrequent services.
Yeah, there's other things. There's total cost of ownership, whether it's the hardware or the connectivity piece. Yep. There's a network longevity piece that LPWA can address better than most of the other solutions out there. So there's a variety of reasons why I think the market is so excited about the LPWA technologies.
Okay, great. Ted, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I agree with all that. These are low-end devices, and so zooming in on the TCO is critical because the value of each device connectivity may be small, but on aggregate, and this is where it gets kind of exciting. When you multiply that value by tens of billions, maybe even hundreds of billions, this becomes a incredibly interesting value prop that we're talking. And it's great to see that there's a lot of like-minded folks that believe that the low power wide area way is the right way to service these devices, and it's a public network, out of the box connectivity. There's been other architectures in the past that I think have somewhat washed out. There's been the mesh that really did not live up to its promise for a number of reasons, including scalability, battery life. You need to be powered to be able to repeat your neighbor's traffic. So the implicit star topology type of architecture that low power wide area has become is really a kind of a unifying theme of all the LPWA approaches out there. Cellular, that was another approach that made some progress in connecting M2M devices, but they're scrambling mightily to put their own low power wide area solution together. So they themselves clearly acknowledge that the 2G, 3G, 4G progression that's out there is not the answer to service these tremendous number of battery sensitive devices. So it's the battleground's kind of becoming very, very clear, and it's good to see that like-mindedness is creating such excitement in the marketplace. And one last point to make is that there's the public networks and then there's private networks. So we're talking public networks here for the most part. There are definitely going to be lots of devices connected via local broadband, local RF, whether it's Zigbee, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. However, that does not service the value of these enormous number of devices that really need this out-of-the-box connectivity experience.
Great. Okay, so it's the simplicity, going back to what Josh is saying, that you're saying that this wide area network and the ability to have a public wide area network is so important. Otherwise, you won't be able to connect very easily a lot of devices. I mean, you basically have to set up more infrastructure yourself and all the operations to support that, and that's very costly for businesses. It's a new IT group, or training your IT group to be able to handle all these kinds of devices. Whereas if it's just out of the box and it works, it's pretty straightforward.
That's right.
And then Ted, you were discussing how basically the cellular folks, 3GPP, have endorsed LPWA and are scrambling quickly to get standards that match the LPWA requirements, and that sort of really is what helped LPWA really come of age in the last year. I think 2015 was sort of the year,
seemed like the breakout.
kind of when it came of age.
Sure, exactly.
All right, great. So let's get into some specific LPWA technologies. Now I'm going to get a little disclaimer here with this question I'm asking, and you're responding to the technologies that various companies and organizations have. So any comparisons made here, this is for your benefit and for audience members. We're comparing the technologies. So the question is, what makes RPMA, and that's Ingenu's LPWA technology, what makes RPMA different than, say, Sigfox's technology and LoRa's technology for being able to meet these needs?
I'll take I think one key element to focus on and the differences in our technologies is capacity. And let's just look at base station or tower capacity. Let's assume an environment where an IoT device is consuming about 100 bytes of data per day. In that type of an environment, an RPMA tower or base station can support about 175,000 endpoints. In that same sort of scenario, a LoRa tower base station can support about 3,500 endpoints, and a Sigfox base station can support less than 1,000 endpoints. So you think about the vast differences of those numbers, and I think obviously that's very critical when you talk about the feasibility of using these technologies to build out a nationwide or even a global network. And of course we have real-world examples of this. We've rolled out our RPMA network to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That covers about 2,000 square miles and includes several large municipal areas of course, Dallas and Fort Worth, but Irving, Plano, Arlington. And we did that with 17 base stations. Looking at a larger picture, we're planning and well on pace to roll out our RPMA network to over 100 cities by the end of 2017. And our plans, and again, we're well on pace to do this, set for us to do this with less than 2,000 base stations or towers. Now, compare that and contrast that to Sigfox, who has similar plans to roll their network to 100 cities throughout the U.S. in upcoming years. In that same announcement where they announced that, they noted that they would be utilizing and working with around 230,000 infrastructure sites to do that deployment. So again, think about the vast differences of those numbers, 2,000 compared to somewhere around 230,000. I think that really speaks to the capacity differences in our technologies.
Okay, great, thank you. Ted, anything to add to?
I mean, I couldn't, agree more. I couldn't underscore what these numbers mean in terms of building a business. You have to remember that there are costs to deploying infrastructure. There's tower construction costs to be able to even put your box on the top of it, and then there's the recurring fees that a carrier operator are going to have to pay. the key to driving connectivity costs down is exactly what Josh is saying, is that those costs have to be shared by an enormous number of endpoints to bring those costs down to where it makes sense for these low-end devices. Capacity is a very good measure for that. Coverage is a great measure because you have to get started. You need that coverage before you can even charge $1. So for the barrier to entry of an operator to create this business, you need to be able to deploy large geographies with very limited amount of funds, which means lots of square miles covered per individual base station. But another thing that I think we can offer, because we've been at this for so long. So a little bit of history. Ingenu, we were on ramp in the past. For 8 years, we've been commercializing our technology using real world customers, addressing their needs and kind of listening to the requirements of their application space. So as a result, we have learned through this process that the endpoints have certain requirements. We almost jokingly call it like a bill of rights. Sure, they may not need, high data rate, voice data rates and above, but they have certain unalienable needs. Some of those examples of some of those include two-way communication. So devices, maybe they're not having a lot of what we call downlink, that's from the network down to the device, but every application we've engaged with at least needs it for configuration. There are a lot of devices that actually are receiving data from the network, and it's very important that a system with broad usability and appeal is able to support the two-way aspect. And another sort of corollary of that two-way is you need that downlink to be able to acknowledge the uplink traffic. So reliable delivery, we used to support it back in our 2009 system. We've just taken it out because nobody is interested in it. If you can't acknowledge the delivery of the data, is it even worth sending it in the first place? And is it even worth having a device connected in the first place? There are potentially applications that can get by without it, but we haven't come across it in all the years that we've been doing this. So downlink is absolutely critical. Another piece that is 100% essential is security. And drilling into security, one of the pieces that the over-the-air network needs to provide is something called authentication. So it's basically a digital signature that confirms that you're the originator, or that device is the originator of that data. Without authentication, you run the risk of having these nefarious agents being able to send up data, just random bits and bytes that can really hurt your back office application and really operationally potentially bring things to its knees. So a lot of folks, or well, I should say all folks we've talked to, don't even have an interest in connecting something that exposes their valuable business processes open to such an attack. We have industry standard authentication built in from the ground up, and that's kind of a unique differentiator when you're looking at the ultra narrowband approaches, Sigfox technology, and the LoRa approaches. They're constrained to very, very small hashes, and that means that they're off script from the industry standard acceptance, and as a result open to some significant attacks, or their customers are, and that's a big problem, we believe. And then I should mention there are some fundamental limitations on these other technologies when it comes to downlink. They have it, but it's not really at the scale that it needs to be. In Europe, for example, there's this 1% duty cycle limitation that takes an already meager downlink at a very low data rate and pinches it off to a trickle. So it's really not very commercially interesting in all of the analysis that we've done. And then, just not to draw on this too much, but the last piece of the value prop that we found via our customers that is essential is firmware download, and being able to do that in a broadcast. And actually, more generally, being able to broadcast to lots of endpoints at the same time. So we have a channel built into our approach that allows that to happen. It wasn't easy. It was something we found early on through our utility partners is required. But at the end of the day, we have an authenticated, robust, with lots of forward error correction on it, way to do this, and it provides a tremendous amount of value prop for the solutions that we've been addressing. And it should be noted that even the cellular low power wide area approaches don't have that capability built in. So these are the kind of things that being forged in the fire of demanding customers, it was kind of hard at the time, but I think we're a much better technology for it.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that. I mean, I think a big difference when you compare us to some of the competitors out there is we're out there and we've been proven. Supporting private network customers, around 40 private networks throughout the world. In as Ted said, in some very demanding vertical markets like the utility sector and the oil and gas sector. And by doing those real world deployments, we've been able to get feedback and from our customers, and through that dialogue, we've been able to make several enhancements and improvements to the technologies throughout the year. And I think some of our competitors in the LPWA space are really going through that real world vetting process today. And if you read some of the press stories, it appears some of those customers aren't necessarily satisfied with the performance they're getting from some of these other solutions. And I think, again, I just think that's something worth emphasizing, is that RPMA has been out there, it's been tested, and it's been proven.
That's great. Okay, so we've talked about a lot here. So I'll kind of frame the discussion, the points that you two brought up from my notes here. And one of the things is just in building the network, it sounds like coverage allows you to then address a market, and then capacity pays for that coverage. And without
That's a good way to look at it, yeah.
without enough capacity, your endpoints simply can't support
Yeah.
the network. And that's important for anyone designing an application, because you don't want to build an application for a technology which will inevitably not be able to sustain itself in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, a key takeaway from that.
You run a sunset risk for a different, not a forced obsolescence, but a natural obsolescence, because the business
Doesn't make sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah, great. So I mean, you have sunsetting with cellular just by the forward motion of the generations, and then you have technology
Mhm.
sunsetting simply because it does, well, it's a business sunsetting, really.
Yeah, it's a good
It's
way to
not
look at
going to
it.
be able to
Can't make
sustain.
money.
But then okay, forgetting that, even though we shouldn't, but let's pretend now we have these networks up. It sounds like there are certain capabilities that the link needs. And Ted, you called it a bill of rights for the devices.
Yes.
And it included that word two-way communications, acknowledgement, security, and the broadcast channel. And what those things are is essentially giving you the features that you need to be able to provide customers a rich experience. I think for an application provider,
Mhm.
all of those things are, if you, let's say you're doing a pay-as-you-go sort of smart parking application. Without security, you won't be able to secure credit card information over the wire, right? It would be very vulnerable to
Mhm.
attacks. However, because RPMA has industry standard security, it is able to do that and to protect those kind of transactions, as well as, just the basic two-way communication. You need two-way communication to enable a pay-as-you-go application, and then,
Yeah.
of course, back to security, but the two-way communication, having that broadcast channel. If there's a vulnerability that's found in your firmware, which is possible, or if you just need to make a change for performance requirements, if you don't have that broadcast channel, it'd be very, very difficult and impossible for the existing LPWA competitors to make firmware updates.
Yeah, you better get that device software right the first time, or you're going to be in trouble.
That's right. And what who wants to have to go to their customers and say, yeah, sorry, we made this mistake, and you're going to have to go out and touch those devices, basically service them,
Yeah.
which brings in those truck roll costs. So
Yeah.
Especially for devices that need to live in the field for 10, 20 years, which is very typical in the LPWA space.
Absolutely.
You have to get it right for that much longer, and it's going to be very hard to hit the target all the time with high reliability without some amount of firmware download
I
capability.
mean, your whole value prop goes away if you have to do one truck roll these devices.
Yeah, one truck roll
often.
instead.
I mean, it's a death knell. So.
it's true. It really kills it. And
Yeah.
I've talked with vendors in the space, and that's exactly the sentiment
Yeah.
that I've received as well. Okay, great. Well, so our next question is, what makes Ingenu, what makes you think that it can go head-to-head with the cellular industry?
Yeah, I'll take a shot. I think, it certainly can seem daunting, I guess, from an outsider perspective. One thing I would focus on is sort of the technology roadmap. Cellular technology, since it's been started and through its many evolutions, has really been focused on getting consumers, and I guess more specifically consumer devices, more data faster and more efficiently. And that's why we've gone from the very inefficient and slow 2G networks to today's extremely efficient and much quicker 4G LTE advanced networks, and certainly we expect that to continue as we move forward with 5G. And of course, these incredible speeds allow for some incredible use cases on our phones and our tablets, and we all pay for that. We all pay a premium for that. I know I do for those incredible speeds, and that's really what the cellular market is built on, is those consumer revenues. And I think that's important to remember, because that's always going to drive their technology roadmap. Their decisions are going to be based on what's best for that segment of their customer base, and that's understandable from their perspective. That's where the revenues are coming from. But it does leave open the possibility that the IoT customer will be kind of left out in the dark, right? And we've kind of seen that with the 2G sunsetting. Obviously, our perspective, our focus is very narrow, completely on the IoT market. And as we know, the IoT market is extremely different than the consumer market. High speeds, large amounts of data are really only needed for a handful of applications. And so I would just question whether or not cellular technology, as it moves forward, is going to be able to adequately serve these two very diverse markets. And again, just because of their focus on the consumer market, what you're left with on the cellular side is really like a mishmash of similar but not yet compatible technologies. Not only you got 2G, you got 3G, you got 4G, and then you're gonna have 5G. You have the old CDMA versus GSM days. Even when you get down to a specific technology, you have multiple bands to support, and it seems like we're only adding complexity on that front with gone from something like 4 to 5 bands on the 2G GSM side to somewhere around 40, I think, with LTE.
Right, yeah.
And so complexity, as I think I mentioned earlier, is not good for the IoT market. Simplicity is essential, and RPMA is simple. It's one technology, one global SKU operating on one band throughout the world. So I think that gives us a huge advantage. I think the other thing I would point out, is the cellular market still doesn't have a true IoT technology out there, right? We certainly expect it here at some point with narrowband IoT, but some specs still have to be finalized on that end. Products still have to be brought to market. So that's not going to happen overnight. So I think those are some of the reasons I think we can compete against the cellular industry.
Before you respond,
yeah.
I actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you about were a couple quotes. I think this is probably a good time to bring it up. Give a quote here. And this is from an author, Nick Hun, who is an Ingerati contributor. He's also a blogger, sort of an IoT insider. And he wrote an article a little while back called NB-IoT and the Internet of Bikes and Labradors. And he goes through a lot of different things, but he talks about, it's an interesting title here, so it goes through some of the relationships or the things that need to happen when technology comes out as far as getting applications to the market. And he starts with how the changes in NB-IoT and the way that is being written have affected different players. And he starts with the chip vendors, and he says, quote, "The sudden acceleration and emphasis on NB-IoT has wrong-footed most of the silicon suppliers." And this is in quote. And he says the sudden acceleration and emphasis on NB-IoT, to give a little context, there have been several other cellular standards that were in the making prior to that, such as Cat 0, Cat 1, LTE-M, as well as a few that have just not been mentioned for a long time, but were definitely there. Anyway, so the point is that it's really, quote, wrong-footed most of the silicon suppliers. And then he goes and talks about module vendors. He says most of those that he's talked to, quote, don't expect to ship anything before the middle of 2017. They all told me that they hadn't expected things to move this quickly, which is, I guess a positive from one angle, but different from another. And sorry, quoting again, "And we're reevaluating their roadmaps, but bringing this stuff online takes time." This stuff meaning the modules, typically at least a year. So that's once the standard is complete. And finally, he talks about how this has affected carriers. He says, "The problem is that these changes need new billing and commissioning software built into the networks. That normally takes," he says, 2 to 3 years. And the answers to my questions suggest the operators are not even thinking about this. So from his perspective, it seems like there's quite a bit in the way from getting something to a finished, polished standard to a commercial product. And to be realistic, it sounds like modules will take a year, and then getting the carriers primed and ready to go will take another 2 to 3 years. So anyway, I thought this would be a good time to kind
It's
of
good
bring
to
that up.
hear. It doesn't happen overnight. I think it's clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long road, and you look at the engine of the technology. It's coming out of 3GPP with GSMA sort of as its marketing layer, and they're scrambling real hard, and they're going as fast as they can to get something out there. But I think what Nick is saying is that if carriers are relying on the engine of 3GPP for their approach, there is going to be a delay. We actually advocate that carriers don't necessarily have to wait for that. The RPMA is here, it's available now, and that would be an excellent long-term leapfrog strategy for cellular carriers. So we've had quite a bit of success advocating that position in the market. But kind of drilling into that a little bit more, one nice thing about 3GPP is that they're very open in the way that they do things, and that really has contributed to a lot of the success and traction that they've had in developing 2G, 3G, 4G. But it also kind of gives a little bit of insight into what they're doing for LPWA. And if you go and you look at their requirements documents and the simulation results that they're doing, some of the substantial cracks are already starting to show, even though they don't actually have systems out there. One of these is you're getting a little bit in kind of the technical deep dive. They rely very heavily on something called transmit packet aggregation. So if you're taking LTE, which is essentially what they're doing, and trying to twist it into the dominant flavors of LPWA, it's inefficient for small payloads. And that's something that cellular has never really concerned itself in the past, because all payloads have been large. You're about to download a big file, or you're going to initiate a broadband session, or even a voice conversation. The handshake required to kick that off is, it's negligible. But now we're changing context. We're talking about packets that we all agree are on average of about 30 bytes on average. It could be a bunch larger, but this is on average. Those have to be supported efficiently, and that's part of the big emphasis on RPMA was solving that problem, and that's the root of what RPMA is. Now you look at what they're doing to kind of patch that limitation. They're aggregating lots and lots of data together at the endpoint, buffering it into large, beefy transactions that doesn't bring the network to its knees. So that's a fair way to be able to meet the requirement with the LTE technology, but a little bit it takes away some of the value proposition of the system to the endpoints, because what if you want your data in real time? What if you want reasonable latency and you don't want to wait a whole day or a couple days for the buffering to happen? That's a problem, and a lot of applications we see actually want their data in a timely fashion, so they have this real-time situational awareness. Alarms is kind of another example. Say a root event causes all kinds of short alarms to be generated. You want those to get through reliably. Well, when you have a technology approach that doesn't handle small, frequent transactions reliably, you run the risk of the system kind of falling over, arguably when you need it the most. So that's kind of another limitation that seems to be exposed, and all the simulation and contribution results in 3GPP make this arbitrarily large aggregation assumption if you read through what is being generated in the 3GPP body. And then, broadcast code download or broadcast channel, they don't have it. It's a roadmap item, who knows when they're going to have it, but to justify the fact they don't need it, they've made assumptions on firmware downloads being between 200 bytes and 2 kilobytes. That's kind of the range that they're using in their simulation, and that just does not square with what we've seen. Firmware downloads are hundreds of kilobytes, even if you can be a little bit creative, and that's what we've been marching to, and that's what our customers have been asking for. So I don't know how that's going to play out without that capability in the cellular industry. So these are some of the technical details that really we've been kind of baking in the system for a long time. And then, the last point that I think I would make on this subject is that you see a lot of pilots being mentioned in press releases, and if you read it, it seems real exciting that 3GPP has this all locked up, and that roadmap is really hitting the rubber's hitting the road. But I would just caution that there's pilots and then there's pilots, and so if you kind of go back historically and you look at Knoll, the Knoll Huawei technology, Clean Slate, have a few different names. There are pilots being released at a pretty steady rate on that technology too. That recently doesn't exist anymore. So there's a big difference between having a pilot, proof of concept, and a actual commercial system that's providing values to consumers. And that's just a grain of salt that I would kind of throw into the mix, that when all these press releases are coming out, it might not mean that the commercial service is imminent as it's kind of implying, I would say.
Okay, all right, so you did, as is appropriate for a CTO, get a little technical
A little
there.
bit nerdy.
But I guess that's all right, so.
What is here for?
So what, as you were going through that lengthy discussion on transmit packet aggregation, it made me think of an analogy for how that works, and I think maybe this might help drive it home to the rest of us.
Please.
So it seems to me that if you think about the way that Amazon delivers packages today, what they do is they basically aggregate packages until they have enough to fill a FedEx truck or UPS, and then they fill it and then ship it. And but where they're going is developing the drone program, where they have small drones that can each easily carry a package and they can deliver that package. And it seems like that's sort of the contrast. The cellular approach is that sort of Mack truck, wait till it's full, then ship it. And then the RPMA approach would be the drone approach, where it picks up the packet and takes it. It's lighter weight, it does exactly what it needs to do, nothing more than it needs to be. Whereas, I mean, shoot, you could even take the analogy further and say, think about like a 4K video streaming. That'd be like a train, right? You're waiting for the whole train, and it's built for that kind of thing, where it's okay to have a little bit of overhead, and you've got tons of data.
That's the way to look at it.
But for these, like you said, frequent small packets of data, it doesn't make sense, or for many applications, to have to wait a long time before you ever get the message, and that could really hurt. Like if you have a business process that is based on these messages coming in a timely fashion, and all of a sudden it gets delayed by a long time, unplanned, that could really mess things up. Anyway, so I thought that might be a way.
That's helpful for sure.
Good, I hope so. And then Josh, you mentioned a couple of things. Just the momentum of the cellular industry is that it's always been trying to get more data faster, more efficiently, and get consumer, really be pushed by that consumer device.
Right.
So video streaming, that sort of thing. And that is in stark contrast with the needs of the IoT. And
Sure.
I think this also kind of goes back to what Ted was saying about that Bill of Rights.
Right.
These devices have certain needs, and if all of our momentum has been going in the opposite direction of those needs, it's difficult to service them properly.
Yeah, it's two very diverse markets that would be, a challenge for any technology to sufficiently address both of those diverse markets at one time.
Yeah, and where this hits the consumer, or anyone who has a device, if you're making a device or you're investing, your enterprise is investing in a bunch of devices, that hurts because, like you said, whenever it comes down to it, they're going to go with the higher ARPU. They're going to go with the consumer, the streaming and the LTE, that kind of data, and they're not necessarily going to put emphasis on servicing the IoT devices.
Right, I think that would be my perspective. I mean, I think, certainly the cell industry is trying to address the IoT market. Give some credit for that, I guess. But,
Sure.
When push comes to shove and you kind of look at the revenue distribution, I mean, some of those decisions are going to be relatively easy probably for them to make on focusing on their technology roadmap and what they need to focus on with the next generation of technologies.
Great, and I guess one final thing that I think is important for anyone investing in the IoT, anybody trying to get connected and get their business up or make a device for it is just thinking about some of the things that Ted mentioned with the broadcast channel and how it's a roadmap item, but it's something that 8 years ago and with your customers giving you feedback on RPMA that you've integrated from the very beginning, and it's not something that's easy to just tack on. You can't really just tack it on.
Right. Yes.
And so it's a long-term investment. So you want to go with a technology that is commercial and has been commercialized for a long time. Great.
Yep.
Okay, so for our final question, I will go ahead and give it back to Josh. Could you speak to the traction of RPMA?
Sure, I think there's a few different measures you could use to measure traction within for RPMA. I mean, certainly one is subscribers and customers signing on to the network, and certainly we're seeing momentum in that as we deploy our network here throughout the United States, and we expect that to grow and accelerate as we begin our deployments overseas. I think another important way to measure traction would be ecosystem development, and I would encourage everyone that's listening to stop by and talk with us at CTIA. We should have some announcements there regarding some major ecosystem partnerships that we put in place. We'll have some of our partners with us at the show, both on the software and the hardware side. And I think what we're seeing is that these partners are like really recognizing not just the multiple attributes of our technology versus the competition and stuff that Ted got into, but also our very aggressive but yet very realistic go-to-market strategies. And what we're seeing now is partners are coming to us, or potential partners are coming to us and want to work with us. And again, I think that more than anything maybe speaks to the traction that we've gained in the market over the last 6 to 12 months.
Okay, great. All right. Ted, anything you want to add to speaking to the traction of RPMA?
No, I think that is a great summary. Ecosystem is a very good measurement. Another measurement may just be, more kind of from the physical perspective, how much network is there, and by the end of this year, we're going to have 30 markets covered. And by markets, not city centers, but average of 2,000 square miles of territory. And then it's going to be 100, the end of next year. So it's going up real fast in the U.S. And then internationally, 53 licensing deal, dozens in the pipeline for our carrier licensees to build networks covering very diverse and vast countries. So it's happening for sure, and there's a number of ways to look at that, but all of the signs are just kind of pointing that this worldwide 2.4 gigahertz network is coming online surprisingly rapidly.
Excellent. All right. So Josh, it sounds like we should stay tuned then at CTIA.
That's right.
It's
only a few weeks away, so yeah.
All right.
It's coming up. Yeah.
Perfect time to go to Vegas.
So, perfect. Okay. And some cool announcements coming there, sounds like. And it really is important to get the network up quickly, and that's what's happening, because that's what businesses need in order to get moving, right? To get connected, the network's got to be there, and it sounds like that's happening very quickly. Fortunately for Ingenu and for those who want to get connected. Well, fantastic. Thank you both very much for all your thoughts and comments. Of course, we've had questions coming in.
Okay.
So I'm gonna turn over here I've got a monitor here with some questions that have come in live. So I will just read them off. Okay, the first question from our audience today is: many IoT applications will require connectivity for indoor devices. How do you respond to RPMA detractors who point out that the 2.4 gigahertz frequency is not good for deep indoor coverage? CTO, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I guess that would be up my alley, wouldn't it?
All right, sounds good.
So, that is a very common. I would call it I wouldn't call it a misconception, because it's definitely, there's some kernel of truth to what this question is getting at. If you look at the freeze transmission equations, and you look at 2.4 gigahertz versus sub-gigahertz spectrum, there's 8 dB of additional link budget, all things being equal, that you get to penetrate, and you can use that to penetrate indoors. But that doesn't take into account that all things are equal. Our things are not equal. So when we chose the 2.4, we were fairly well aware of this, and there's a couple ways that this is actually mitigated and turned into an advantage ultimately for us. One is, with the smaller wavelength of 2.4 gigahertz, we can use something called antenna diversity. For stationary objects, that somewhat coincidentally adds back that link budget that you kind of lose in the first place by going to 2.4. But then, because of a lot of the rules of 2.4, we were able to make an extremely sensitive radio, minus 145 dBm, which is better than anything else out there. So we actually have quite a considerable coverage advantage, even though, if you do kind of the apples to apples comparison of a technology 2.4 900, 2.4 would have a slight headwind. And then, just not to overly belabor the point, but 2.4 has an enormous amount of additional benefit. 80 megahertz of spectrum, as opposed to little slivers of a couple hundred kilohertz here and there in other regions in many of the sub-gig bands. And then, as we keep kind of coming back to this global network. 2.4 is the only frequency out there that's global, and that was first and foremost why we selected that.
Okay, so just to start where you ended, so a single SKU works anywhere over the whole world. I think you mentioned that in our last live panel,
Right.
when talking about the 2.4 band. And then just to make it clear, so when you say that all things equal, the 2.4 band loses 8 dB link budget, you then said antenna diversity. I'm going to take that to mean more than one antenna.
Yeah, 2 antennas in a small, quarter wavelength, which is supportable, kind of uniquely supportable in a small LPWA form factor.
Okay.
And that's why we do it.
And that makes up for the 8 dB. And then so the regulations sounds like are very good for 2.4 as opposed to other bands.
Yeah, we don't have this 1% duty cycle limitation, so we can offer full bore downlink. And then 2.4 is real nice if you couple that with direct sequence spread spectrum, which is that coupling is kind of magical.
Great, and I know that there's a white paper that we have available which compares directly the 2.4 band with the 900 band. So if anybody wants to download that, it's got more details. And of course, get in touch with us if you'd like. Josh, was there something you wanted to add?
No, I would just say, I think Ted covered, why this maybe isn't as much of an issue as it's assumed, but also on the product side, we are on a product roadmap, certainly very aggressively looking at solutions to address this issue when it is an issue, and that's something that in terms of enhancing indoor coverage in some areas, and that's something that we certainly are working aggressively on and are going to address.
Yeah, I mean, one existence proof is.
Okay, guys, stop for a sec. We have connectivity problems here.
Oh.
I'm gonna go get. Well, it's too late now. I paused it. Tell them to give us like 2 minutes. I'm gonna go get Ethernet cable and
Okay.
try it that way.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
Wi-Fi keeps crapping out the whole time.
The whole time?
Every now and again.
Let you know to go.
Hmm.
Everybody's now getting off.
Yeah, I mean, what time is it?
It's 11:42.
Okay, one more question maybe? No one's gonna stay on any longer. Oh, what's that?
You hit that second point, interference.
I didn't know if we should go on the indoor thing and not mention that, but it's worth it.
It's all good. Did you want to do any of these?
The lower one.
Either
People
way.
aren't asking about it, so I think they're still asking more about technical stuff.
That's cool.
Let's see if this thing's alive.
Did anybody put a message on there letting you know we're working
Yeah.
on
So we're working on it, and they're saying, I hope you're gonna make the recording available. Yeah. I said, the recording will be available.
So the recording should be okay, huh?
Yeah. Crap.
What's that right there? That RD45 or phone?
Looks like phone. Phone to me. Just change it.
Unpause and pray?
It seems to be moving, not buffering right now.
Yeah, well, it says it's good here, but it keeps crapping out.
All right, well, we've only got like 5 minutes, so.
All right, let's go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I guess we were having some connectivity issues. Wi-Fi, not us. All right. All right, great. So we not sure exactly where we dropped off, but we were just talking about. I think Ted, you were about to say something regarding the indoor coverage was.
I think it was going to be brilliant, but I forgot what it
It was
was.
probably an
Probably
amazing.
amazing.
All
I
right.
know. Yeah. So sorry about that. We do have a network in San Diego on behalf of the utility company in San Diego that actually is built it out to not just cover indoors, but to cover below manhole covers, in pad mounts, in vaults. So it's kind of a whole new level of depth that I don't think has ever really been done before in a wide area network. This is the private network we built on behalf of our utility company, local utility company, and that was providing a tremendous amount of value for that customer. So I think, yeah, part of the low power wide area vision is you got to get that network to where things are, and these things may not have been designed to be located in RF friendly environments, and that's part of the vision of the out of the box connectivity. You shouldn't even have to worry if you're in a RF disadvantaged place or not. It needs to connect.
So I snuck and saw the next question, and it says, because of the sheer volume of 2.4 gigahertz networks, conflicts and interference can develop. How does RPMA address this interference? I guess that kind of is a great follow-up to the thing you're just saying. You say sometimes there are RF unfriendly environments. What does RPMA do to address those unfriendly environments?
I mean, that helps get right to the core of what RPMA was designed to do in the first place, which is to, if you're going to do business in 2.4, you have to expect that there's other traffic in 2.4, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, variety of other technologies live there, and being able to take a system and make it robust when you're putting it on a tower and you have the line of sight to tens of thousands of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices was something that you really need to put some consideration into. And so at all layers of the protocol, from the signaling to the measurement of interference to the signaling to the physical layer of having very, very long symbols, long as cellular frames, to be able to get as much diversity as possible in there to deal with diversity interference in the 2.4 band. It factors into our frequency assignments, where we typically deploy in between the commonly used Wi-Fi frequencies and at lower band and upper band. And it goes to our processes, right? Because no matter what you do, in some cases, like when you're on the tallest building in Los Angeles, which we are, we know that we're going to have a degraded link budget relative to if we're in pristine or rural territory in East County, San Diego. So we're not getting 300 square miles per access point in downtown LA, but we're getting 30. And if you can imagine that that's a tremendous value prop and easily supportable. So it's exactly what RPMA was designed to do. And that's a dead-on question.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ted kind of alluded to it, but we are already operating in some very dense urban type of environments where there is a lot of volume on the 2.4 spectrum, and we're operating successfully in those environments and not running into interference issues. So I mean, again, non-CTO speak is we're already doing that, and we're.
I guess I could have just gone there.
Right? No, but
5 years, 500 access points,
Right.
38 countries. I mean, it's all
Right.
it's been proven.
Just curious, just to give it, I guess, a little, I don't know, to bring it home a little. What are some of these challenging areas where we've deployed? Like, what would you say is one? LA sounds like a
LA, I
pretty
think, is the worst
area.
we've seen, just because of the sheer density of and the very advantaged play. The more advantaged you put a access point or
As
a
in
base
high up?
station in terms of high up, the more 2.4 traffic it's going to see. And so the LA one is, just to put some nerdy numbers on it, we lose about 20 dB of link budget based on that.
But you still get
But we still get
30 square miles of coverage?
Yeah, so it's a
Okay.
gradual, and when we do a network plan, when we do our maps, all that information is factored into our map. So when you see green, it's because, even factoring that in, there's still very, very reliable coverage that becomes part of our processes of building a public network that's going to meet the requirements of the end users that are going to be using it.
Okay, great. And I think 8 years of paying customers is also a testament to the success
Absolutely.
there. So, all right. So I think we are out of time. See, do we have a short question we can hit? Let's see. Do we have time? We got time. All right. Please touch on the security again, comparing a typical remote IP network connection to a WAN.
bunch of CTO fans out there in the audience.
There's a lot of CTO questions.
So yeah, our security is, we call them security guarantees, and they're equal to, if not better in many cases, than what a cellular wide area network would provide. And cellular really does a very good job in our opinion. We do more from a connectivity layer, make sure that there's no vulnerabilities there based on mutual authentication, industry standard encryption. We have on all of our broadcast channel, we have industry standard authentication. So all of these guarantees are designed to make it such that this is not the bottleneck. And then our customers are invited to put their own encryption on at the application layer. If they would like another layer of encryption, there's nothing that keeps that from happening. So this is a technology that has survived many security audits on behalf of our utility customers who have taken it and have gotten NERC SIP certifications on their processes. So that's not just the connectivity layer, that's their business practices and applications on top of that. But the fact is, we, with this connectivity, are enabling our customers to pass pretty much some of the most rugged certification audits that there are in the space.
And those are federally mandated
NERC SIP
standards.
is federally mandated,
Right.
yeah.
So what you're saying is a utility, which could be fined millions and millions of dollars a day, passes its security audits using RPMA.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
I'm just saying. I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Okay, one last question. 30 seconds.
Okay.
Just because these are great. All right. So if RPMA becomes the de facto standard, which is the goal at least right now, what will your stance be towards complying with later or other standards?
Well, I think when RPMA becomes a de facto standard,
when-
right?
Okay.
No, that's not. I think 30 seconds, I would say, I think we addressed this point some in our previous,
The previous one, yeah.
webinar, but certainly that's something, we'll look at that time, but, we kind of think our kind of de facto approach to date has been pretty successable.
All right.
And then we kind of framed it last time between sort of the connectivity standards, which is what we are going to be de facto, and then the data standards, which are sort of outside of the connectivity layer that we believe is essential, as that report that InterDigital and Mechana did is absolutely critical. And so we do advocate that our interfaces are plumbed into these variety of data standards that are getting a lot of attention.
Okay, great. So in short, to get more of an answer to that, check out our last live panel. If you go to our YouTube channel, it'll be there.
True.
Right, yeah, we've done it, right? So
Right,
check that out.
absolutely.
Also, a lot of the things that you've talked about, I think some of the numbers that you mentioned earlier, have estimate calculations that justify them in an ebook, The Making of RPMA. I think it's How RPMA Works, The Making of RPMA. And of course, any other questions, we have white papers about interference and other things. So
Yeah, and I see a question on there about RPMA radios and more devices. Certainly, that's something I can respond to, over email. But yeah, I'd also encourage you to come talk to us at CTIA and talk about our plans there. So we do have some very aggressive plans on that end.
awesome, that's right. And then there's this big announcement, sounds like, at CTIA, and Josh will be there. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for bearing with us and for being with us. It's been a pleasure for us. On behalf of our
Yes.
panelists
Thanks.
here, we'll see you at our next event. Thanks so much.
Thank you.